tremendous appreciation, from my understanding, that my dad had a gift, and you know, they let Jerry be Jerry, you know, which is wonderful. You know, I mean, that's what creative people need. Creative people need the space and the freedom to be able to express themselves. And I don't think my dad ever would have been able to do what he had done if it wasn't for the fact that he was, you know, nurtured in that.
And that's the Schuster side.
What was the situation there? Was there a point where the family was encouraging Joe to, give up his dream of Superman and get a real job?
Well, they were, I know from my mother telling me the stories of when she was a kid and a teenager, they were in deep poverty and depression. And they both, I know that both of them, Joe and Jerry, that they would get out and take jobs. And before they hit it big with Superman in '38, I know that they worked, that Jerry did lettering work for a sign printer, and Joe did newspapers, deliveries, and he sold things, and they just did anything they could. But the family was supportive of Joe, and all they could afford to give him to write on was the breadboard and butcher paper or any other scraps of paper, like the back of wallpaper has been mentioned. Usually it was butcher paper, actually. But anytime they could get anything at all to help them, they would, even though they couldn't get it much. They were very supportive, and like Laura said, the artists, they need encouragement and freedom from their loved ones to pursue their dreams, because it's easy to give up. So yeah, I really appreciate that our family is supportive of everyone who's been creative in our family, myself included, and particularly my Uncle Joe.
One of the stories that I remember that my mom would tell me about my uncle during the Great Depression was that they had all the comic books stacked up in the bedroom, and they used those, the first copy, to start fires, because they were only worth 10 cents at the time. And for some reason, that really stuck in my mind of one of the stories of the, you know, when they were trying to make it work. But I don't think they ever had a pressure to go get a real job or anything.
I don't know. I don't have an answer related to Joe because I didn't know his family, but my grandfather was his first cousin, and I know that there's two stories about my grandfather because during that state of poverty, he had to stop. He had to drop out of school in 8th grade and go back to work. So I know it was a very bad time for the family. The other. Well, I think that's how I would. That's how I would.
Did you have a comment on that?
What I wanted to talk about is a lot of things that Jerry told me about his life and his family, and he said that he was born on Central Avenue, and Barlene said that they must have moved there when he was about 3 years old. I'm Kimberly. Right, that's what I meant. And so when he was 5 years old, he told me this. He told me when he was 5 years old, he had to have a tonsillectomy. And so there was a doctor within walking distance who did it in his office. And so his mother took out the baby carriage and put him in and pushed him to the doctor, and he had the tonsillectomy. And on the way home, when he was halfway home, he realized his friends would be outdoors and see him in the baby buggy. So he scrambled out of this buggy, and his mother protesting, "No, Sharon, please." And he insisted. And he held onto the side of the baby buggy and walked home. And when he got to the bottom of those steps we all walked over, he collapsed on the steps. And his mother had to carry him into the house. And he said, well, after a long nap and lots of ice cream, he felt much better, and soon he was out playing with his friends again. Right, yeah, that was it. So maybe you have a little story you want to tell, and I'll know when we apply.
That's fine.
I think
on it, and it was my standing outside, and he pushed me off the ledge and broke my leg. And I stayed at my grandmother's house because she had a front porch, and we lived in an apartment. And every day, my Uncle Jerome would come over and bring me down the steps to the front porch. And my grandmother would say, "Don't go so fast, she's on your back. Don't let her fall." That's what I remember, bringing me down every day.
I did, when you were talking about the Depression before, I wanted to mention that, you know, one of the fascinating things to me about my family history, and it's of course connected to Superman, but it has to do with my mom, is that here she was a very young girl in the Depression, and, you know, adults were having a hard time getting a job, and yet she was so industrious and, you know, had such a sense of wanting to do something in the world that she put that ad in a Cleveland Plain Dealer. So why don't you just talk about that for a second, about what made you do that?
Well, if I didn't raise my own money, I didn't get to go to the movies. And I loved movies just like all the other kids did. And the other way that kids, it was this sort of universal habit of kids, and the parents would look the other way because you could get a bottle of milk for 8 cents, and 5 cents of that was for the deposit of the milk bottle. And the parents would allow the kids, they would pile up under the sink, and then the kids would take them, and the parents would pretend they didn't know, and they would take it back for the deposit, and that's how they got to get extra money. But sometimes they spend it on candy before Sunday, or movies, or a magazine, or something. So if you had to be resourceful, or you didn't have any money, that was it.
If I could mention that, what she did, I believe how old were you when you put the ad in the paper?
You know, it's such a long time ago. My guess is 16, 17.
Yeah. And she put an ad in the Plain Dealer that said, artist available, looking, willing to pose. And just as a little backstory, I tried for years to find that advertisement in our records that I worked at the Plain Dealer, and my eyes got bleary. I never found it. Somehow Brad Ricker found it. Brad's in the back. Yeah. I can't believe it. But it just struck me that it was from that ad that Joe and Jerry met. And then later you eventually married Jerry.
Right. It's kind of formed a destiny because of the starting point of something that blew up like popcorn, you know. And it evolved, it got larger and larger. And I had other opportunities. Job radio, and things didn't work out. Too long a story to tell about that. But so, you know, it was tough in those days.
Did you remain friends with?
And that's why I'm here today.
Did you remain friends with both Jerry and Joe after that? Did you remain friends with Jerry and Joe over the years?
Absolutely, yes. Sure. After I had my 4 Saturdays with Joe, we had become very good friends because we had the same interests. So I thought they were younger than they were, but they were actually 21 years old, you know, and out of school. They had already sold some comics like Henry Duval, Spy, Slam Bradley, Calling All Cars, and maybe Dr. Occult.
Dr. Occult, yes.
So, you know.
It was actually the first